You are standing in a room full of people you have known for years. Maybe it is a family dinner. Maybe it is a gathering with old friends. Maybe it is a meeting at work where everyone laughs at the right moments and says the right things and performs their role with a kind of effortless precision. And somewhere in the middle of it all, without warning, something drops inside your chest. A quiet, sinking feeling. Not anger exactly. Not sadness. Something stranger, something colder. You look around at these faces. Faces you have loved. Faces you have trusted. And a thought crosses your mind that you immediately try to push away because it feels dangerous. It feels ungrateful. It feels like something must be wrong with you for even thinking it. The thought is this: none of this is real. These people are not real. Not in the way that matters. Not in the way your soul is desperate for. They are performing. Smiling when they do not mean it. Asking how you are without wanting the answer. Saying I love you out of routine rather than revelation. And the worst part, the part that keeps you up at night, is that you cannot tell anymore whether you are the only one who sees it or whether you are the one who has lost the ability to connect. Whether the problem is the world or whether the problem is you. I want to talk about this feeling today because it is one of the most misunderstood experiences a human being can go through. And I want to talk about it through the lens of someone who understood it better than almost anyone in modern history. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his entire life exploring the hidden layers of the human mind, had a very specific framework for what happens when you start perceiving the people around you as fake. And what he discovered was not what you would expect. It was not that those people are necessarily deceiving you. It was not that you are broken or too cynical or incapable of love. It was something far deeper, far more uncomfortable, and far more transformative than any of those explanations. It had to do with what he called the persona, the mask that every human being constructs in order to survive in society, and what happens when one person in a group begins to see through not only the masks of others, but their own mask as well. Because that is the part no one tells you. When everyone around you starts to feel fake, it is not just an observation about them. It is a signal that something inside you is waking up, something that has been buried for a very long time, and that awakening is going to change everything if you let it. You have been carrying this longer than you realize. This feeling of being surrounded by surfaces, of living in a world where conversations feel scripted, where emotional exchanges feel transactional, where you walk away from people and feel more alone than you did before you saw them. And the loneliest part is that you cannot say it out loud. You cannot sit across from someone at dinner and say, I feel like you are not really here. I feel like you are showing me a version of yourself that does not actually exist. I feel like I am suffocating under the weight of all this politeness, all this performance, all this careful choreography of human interaction that everyone else seems perfectly comfortable with. You cannot say that because the moment you do, people look at you like something is wrong with you. They tell you that you are overthinking. They tell you to lighten up. They tell you to be grateful for the people in your life. And so you learn to keep it inside. You learn to nod along. You learn to perform your own version of the mask. And that is where the real damage begins. I once spoke with a man in his early 40s who had what most people would call a perfect life. He had a successful career, a beautiful family, a wide circle of friends who admired him. He was the kind of person everyone described as solid, reliable, the one you could count on. And one autumn evening, sitting in a quiet corner of a half-empty cafe, while rain streaked down the windows, he told me something that he said he had never told another human being. He said, I do not think I have had a single honest conversation in over a decade. Not one. Not with my wife. Not with my closest friends. Not even with myself. He stared into his coffee when he said that. and his voice did not waver, which somehow made it worse. He was not dramatic about it. He was stating a fact. He had spent so many years being the person everyone needed him to be that he had lost contact with whoever he actually was underneath. And the terrifying part, the part that made his hands shake slightly as he said it, was that he had started to suspect that the people around him had done the same thing. That nobody in his life was real. That they were all just showing each other their masks and calling it intimacy. What this man was describing, without knowing the psychological language for it, was something Jung mapped out with extraordinary precision. Jung understood that every human being develops what he called the persona, a word he deliberately borrowed from the Latin term for the masks that actors wore in ancient Roman theater. The persona is not a lie exactly. It is more like a negotiation. It is the self you construct in response to the world's demands. The version of you that knows how to behave at work, how to be charming at a party, how to say the right thing to your mother on the phone. And, for most of your life, this mask serves you well. It keeps you safe. It helps you belong. It earns you love, or at least what looks like love from the outside. But here's what Jung discovered, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. The persona is not you. It was never you. It is a tool, a survival mechanism, a costume you put on so early in life that you forgot you were wearing it. And the moment you begin to sense the gap between the mask and the person underneath, between the role you play and the self that exists beneath it, everything starts to shift. You begin to see the same gap in other people. You begin to notice how your friend laughs a certain way when she is around certain people, a laugh you have never heard when she is alone with you. You notice how your partner uses a specific voice on the phone with colleagues that sounds nothing like the person who sits beside you in silence. You notice how everyone at the dinner table is saying, "Fine," when someone asks how they are, and nobody, not a single person, is telling the truth. And here is the part that will probably stop you in your tracks. Jung argued that the reason you see fakeness in others is not because you have suddenly become more perceptive. It is because something inside you is beginning to reject your own mask. Your psyche is trying to individuate, to use Jung's term, which means it is trying to move toward wholeness, toward an authentic self that exists beyond the roles and performances you have built your identity around. And this process, this terrifying, beautiful, destabilizing process, begins with exactly the experience you are having right now. The feeling that everyone around you is fake is the first symptom of your own mask cracking. It is not a problem. It is an initiation. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And I remember the first time I read that line, I thought it was just a pretty quote, something you stitch on a pillow or put on a poster. But the longer I sat with it, the more I realized how devastating it actually is. Because embedded in that sentence is a brutal admission. Most people never become who they truly are. Most people spend their entire lives being who they were told to be, who they needed to be, who they learned to perform as so early and so thoroughly that the performance became indistinguishable from reality. The privilege of a lifetime. Privilege. Meaning it is rare. Meaning most people do not get there. And the reason most people do not get there is not because they lack intelligence or courage. It is because the process of removing the mask is one of the most painful experiences a human being can endure. Because when you take off the mask, you have to face what is underneath. And what is underneath is not the polished, confident, lovable self you have been presenting to the world. What is underneath is everything you have been hiding. Your shame, your rage, your grief, your hunger for something you cannot name, the parts of you that you amputated in childhood because someone, a parent, a teacher, a peer, made you understand that those parts were not welcome. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow enters the picture And this is where the real revelation lives. The shadow is the repository of everything you have rejected about yourself. Every trait, every desire, every impulse that did not fit the persona you needed to construct. If you were raised to be agreeable, your shadow holds your aggression. If you were raised to be strong, your shadow holds your vulnerability. If you were raised to be good, your shadow holds everything you were taught to call bad. And here is the connection that most people miss entirely. The reason everyone around you feels fake is not just because they are wearing masks. It is because you are projecting your own shadow onto them. You are seeing in others the inauthenticity that you have not yet fully confronted in yourself. I know that is a hard thing to hear. I resisted it myself for a long time. I wanted the problem to be out there. I wanted the world to be the liar, not me. But Jung was relentless on this point. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And what he meant was not that other people are blameless. What he meant was that the intensity of your reaction, the degree to which their fakeness disturbs you, the depth of the revulsion you feel when you watch people perform, that intensity is a signal. It is pointing you inward. It is saying, look here. There's something in you that mirrors what you see in them, and until you face it, you will never be free of it." Let me tell you a story from ancient Greece that I think illuminates this perfectly. There is the myth of Narcissus, which most people misunderstand. We use the word narcissist today to describe someone who is vain, someone who is in love with their own reflection. But the original myth is far more nuanced. Narcissus was a young man of extraordinary beauty who was loved by many but who could not love anyone in return. He could not connect. Everyone who approached him felt like a surface to him, a mirror rather than a soul. And one day he came to a still pool of water and saw his own reflection, and he could not look away. He became trapped, unable to move, unable to live, unable to do anything but stare at the image he had mistaken for the whole of who he was. He wasted away there, gazing at a surface. Jung saw this myth as a perfect metaphor for what happens when a person becomes identified with their persona. When you mistake the mask for the self, you become like Narcissus. You can only see surfaces in yourself and in everyone else. The world becomes a hall of mirrors. Everyone feels flat because you have become flat. Everyone feels fake because you are experiencing life through a layer of performance that strips all depth from human connection. And the only way out, just as in the myth, is to break the surface of the water, to plunge beneath the reflection and discover what lies in the depths. There was a woman I knew, a therapist herself actually, who went through a period in her late 30s where she became convinced that every person in her life was performing. Her marriage felt hollow. Her friendships felt like mutual obligations. Even her relationship with her patients started to feel mechanical, like she was just reciting techniques she had memorized rather than genuinely helping anyone. She told me about a particular evening when she was sitting on her back porch watching the sun go down, and she realized she could not remember the last time she had felt genuinely moved by another person. Not impressed, not entertained, not comforted, moved, touched at a level that mattered. And that realization terrified her more than anything she had ever encountered in her professional work with trauma and grief. She started what Jung would call a process of active engagement with her shadow. She began journaling not about what she thought and believed, but about what she felt and feared. She started writing letters to the version of herself she had been at 15, before she became professional, before she became proper, before she learned to measure every word. And what came up in those letters shocked her. Fury. Deep old fury at being forced into a caretaker role as a child. Grief at never having been allowed to be selfish, to be wild, to be difficult. She had built her entire identity, her entire persona, around being the calm one, the wise one, the one who held space for others. And in doing so, she had exhaled every part of herself that was messy, needy, hungry for attention, capable of cruelty. She had become so thoroughly good that she was no longer fully human. And because she was no longer fully human, she could not fully see the humanity in others. She could only see their masks, because she could only see the world through her own. This is the mechanism. This is what Jung spent decades mapping. When you are deeply identified with your persona, when the mask is fused to your skin so completely that you cannot distinguish between who you are and who you perform, then everyone around you will appear to be performing too. Not because they are not performing, many of them are, but because you have lost the capacity to see beneath performance. You have lost the organ of depth perception, so to speak. You can detect surfaces with extraordinary accuracy, but you cannot feel into the reality underneath because you have been cut off from your own reality underneath. Maybe for you, this shows up in your closest relationship. You lie next to someone at night and feel a vast, unbridgeable distance between your body and theirs, even though your shoulders are touching. You listen to them talk about their day, and something in you silently screams, "But who are you really?" You watch them smile at a neighbor or charm a stranger, and you think, "That is not the person I live with." That is the show. And it fills you with a loneliness so specific and so private that you would not even know how to explain it to someone else. Or maybe it shows up at work. You sit in meetings where everyone is collaborating and contributing and being team players, and you feel like you're watching a play from the back row. You see the politics beneath the politeness. You see the ambition hiding behind the teamwork. You see the fear underneath the enthusiasm, and you wonder how everyone else manages to ignore it. How they just keep showing up and performing with such conviction, day after day, year after year, without ever once stopping to say, "What are we actually doing here?" Or maybe, and this is the one that cuts the deepest, it shows up when you're alone. When the room is quiet and the day is done and there is no one left to perform for, and you catch yourself still performing, still narrating your own life in your head, still curating your thoughts as if someone were watching, still unable to simply sit with yourself without the mask, without the story, without the role. And in that moment, you realize the most frightening thing of all. The fakeness you have been sensing in others is also in you. It has been in you this whole time. You have been the actor and the audience simultaneously, and you are exhausted from the effort. If you are recognizing yourself in this, I want you to do something small but significant. Leave one word in the comments. The word is awake. Not for me, for you. Let it be a quiet marker that on this day, in this moment, you allowed yourself to see something you have been looking away from. But here is what most people never get to hear. Seeing it is not the end of the story. Seeing it is the beginning. And what comes next is the part that changes everything if you have the willingness to walk into it. The first thing that has to shift is your relationship with discomfort. I know that sounds abstract, so let me make it concrete. Right now, your nervous system is wired to avoid authenticity because at some point in your life, being authentic was punished. Maybe you expressed anger as a child and were told you were bad. Maybe you showed vulnerability and were mocked. Maybe you said something true and someone you loved withdrew from you. Your body learned from those experiences. It learned that the mask is safety and that the truth is danger. And so, every time you approach an honest conversation, every time you consider dropping the performance, your body floods with cortisol, with anxiety, with a wordless dread that something terrible will happen if you let yourself be seen as you really are. The first shift is learning to stay in that discomfort without running, not to force yourself into radical honesty overnight, not to rip off the mask in some dramatic gesture of self-revelation, but to begin, slowly, carefully, to notice the moments when you reach for the mask and to ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of right now? Jung had a practice he called active imagination, and while the full technique is complex, the essence of it is simple enough to start using today. When you feel the impulse to perform, when you catch yourself putting on the pleasant smile or the agreeable tone or the carefully constructed response, pause. Close your eyes if you can. And ask the part of you that is hiding, what do you want to say? Then wait. Do not force an answer. Do not manufacture some deep insight. Just wait, the way you would wait for a shy animal to emerge from the tree line. Something will come. It might be a word. It might be an image. It might be a memory you have not thought about in years. Whatever it is, receive it. Do not judge it. Do not fix it. Just receive it. This is how you begin to hear the voice beneath the mask. This is how you start to rebuild a relationship with the self you abandoned in order to survive. The second shift is harder, and I will not pretend otherwise. You have to begin allowing the people around you to be imperfect, to be performing, to be fake, without needing them to stop. This sounds counterintuitive. You are in pain precisely because everyone around you seems to be performing. Why would you allow that to continue? But here is what I have learned, and what Jung's work points to again and again. When you demand authenticity from others, before you have fully confronted your own inauthenticity, you are using them as a mirror to avoid looking directly at yourself. You are saying, you be real first, so I do not have to take the risk. The shift is to stop requiring other people to validate your awakening, to stop needing them to take their masks off so you can feel less alone in taking yours off, to accept that most people are doing the best they can with the consciousness they have, and that their masks, just like yours, were forged in the fire of childhood wounds and social survival. This is not about excusing dishonesty or tolerating toxicity. It is about releasing the resentment you carry toward other people for not being further along in a journey they may not even know they're on. There is a concept in Buddhist philosophy that resonates deeply with this Jungian insight. It is the idea of compassion, born from seeing clearly. When you understand that the person in front of you is wearing a mask, not because they are malicious, but because they are afraid, something softens in you. The irritation loosens its grip. The contempt begins to dissolve. And in its place, something more complex arises. A kind of tender sadness. A recognition that we are all trapped in the same theater, all performing for an audience that is itself performing, and that the way out is not to condemn the performance, but to gently, courageously begin removing your own costume. The third shift is the one that takes time, and I want to be honest about that. It is the process Jung called individuation, and it is not a weekend retreat. It is not a breakthrough you have after one meditation session. It is the work of years, sometimes decades. Individuation is the process of integrating the shadow, of reclaiming the exiled parts of yourself, of moving from a life organized around the persona to a life organized around the self, which Jung described as the totality of who you are, the center that includes both your light and your darkness, both your mask and what lies beneath it. If this is landing for you in a way that feels personal, if you are hearing something in these words that you needed to hear today, I want to ask you to share this with someone who might be going through their own version of this. Not because I need the views, because there is someone in your life right now, maybe someone who has been quieter than usual, maybe someone who is pulled away from the group, maybe someone who seems angry or distant or lost, who is having exactly this experience and does not have the words for it yet. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for another person is to say, I heard something that made me think of you. Jung wrote, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And what he was describing is the power of genuine encounter, of two people dropping the performance long enough to actually touch each other's reality. This kind of encounter is rare. It is rare because it requires both people to be willing to be uncomfortable, to be seen, to be imperfect out loud. But when it happens, it is the most transformative experience available to a human being. It is not just connection. It is recognition. It is the moment when another person sees past your mask and you see past theirs. And what you find is not perfection, not some idealized version of humanity, but something raw and flawed and trembling and absolutely real. The fourth shift is one that sounds simple, but will rearrange the architecture of your daily life. It is the practice of choosing one honest moment per day. One moment where you say what is actually true instead of what is safe. One moment where you let the mask slip, even slightly. It does not have to be dramatic. It can be as small as telling a friend, I am not doing well today, when they ask how you are. It can be as quiet as admitting to yourself in the privacy of your own mind that you are lonely, that you are afraid, that you do not know who you are without the role you have been playing. These small moments of honesty are not small at all. They are cracks in the mask. And through those cracks, something living can finally breathe. I want to tell you about a man named Hermann Hesse, the German novelist who was a patient of a Jungian analyst, and whose work was profoundly shaped by his encounters with Jung's ideas. In his novel Demian, Hesse wrote something that has stayed with me for years. He wrote, the bird fights its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Who would be born must first destroy a world. When I first read that, I felt a chill run through me because it describes exactly what this process feels like. The world you have been living in, the world of masks and performances and polite fictions, that world is the egg, and you are the bird. And the cracking you feel, the disorientation, the grief, the terrifying sense that everything you have known is a construct, that is not destruction, that is birth. It is violent and disorienting, and it feels like the end of something because it is. It is the end of who you pretended to be, and the beginning of who you actually are. Now, I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine it is 6 months from now, a year from now, some unmeasured amount of time during which you have been doing this work, not perfectly, not consistently, but persistently. You have been sitting with the discomfort. You have been writing those letters to yourself. You have been choosing honesty in small moments and feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And one evening you were at a gathering. Maybe the same kind of gathering that used to make you feel like you were drowning in a sea of performance. And you notice something different. Not in them, in you. You are standing there, and someone asks how you are, and instead of the automatic fine, you pause. And you say, honestly, I have been going through something. I am not sure I have the words for it yet, but I am figuring things out. And the person looks at you, really looks at you, and something in their eyes shifts. And they say, me too. And in that moment, in that two-word response, the entire theater collapses. Not in a catastrophic way, in a liberating way. The masks do not disappear. They are still there, but they are being held differently, loosely, consciously. Not as a prison, but as a choice. And you realize that you can see this person now, not their role, not their performance, not their carefully curated social self. Them. The scared, hopeful, confused, beautiful human being underneath. And they can see you. This is what waits on the other side. Not a world without masks. that world does not exist, but a world where you are no longer a prisoner of yours. A world where you can put the mask on and take it off with awareness, where you know the difference between the role and the self, where you can participate in the theater of social life without losing yourself in it. It will not be perfect. You will still have moments of disconnection, moments where the old loneliness returns, moments where you catch someone in a performance and feel that familiar sinking in your chest. But the quality of those moments will be different, because you will know what you are seeing, you will understand it, and understanding transforms everything, not by removing the pain, but by giving it meaning. The woman I mentioned earlier, the therapist who felt like the whole world had gone flat, I spoke with her again about a year after our first conversation. She looked different. Not radically, not like she had undergone some visible transformation, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there before, a kind of settled warmth. She told me that the process of confronting her shadow, of acknowledging the parts of herself she had denied for decades, had been the hardest thing she had ever done. Harder than graduate school, harder than her divorce, harder than anything she had walked her patients through. But she said something else that I have never forgotten. She said, "I do not see fake people anymore. That does not mean everyone is honest. It means I can see why they are not. I can see the fear behind the mask. And when you can see the fear, you cannot hate them for it. You can only love them, and you can only do that because you finally learn to see the fear behind your own mask. And you learn to love yourself for it." Jung wrote, and this is perhaps the quote I return to more than any other, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That is the complete arc of what we have been talking about. You started this experience looking outside, looking at the people around you and seeing falseness, seeing masks, seeing performance. And that perception was real. You were not imagining it. The masks are real. The performances are real. But the reason you could suddenly see them, the reason they disturbed you so deeply, the reason they kept you up at night and made you feel like a stranger in your own life, was that something inside you was waking up. Your psyche was ready to look inward, ready to confront the mask you have been wearing, ready to begin the long, slow, sacred process of becoming whole. I want to bring you back to where we started. You standing in a room full of people. The laughter, the conversation, the familiar faces. That sinking feeling in your chest. That thought you tried to push away. None of this is real. I want you to hold that moment in your mind, but I want you to see it differently now. That sinking feeling was not despair. It was recognition. It was the first tremor of an earthquake that is going to rebuild the foundations of your life. The people in that room are not your enemies. They are your mirrors. And the image they are reflecting back to you is not their inauthenticity. It is your own readiness. Your readiness to stop pretending. Your readiness to stop looking for realness in others and to start cultivating it in yourself. Your readiness to do the one thing that most human beings will go their entire lives avoiding. To take off the mask and meet your own face. If you feel something stirring in you right now, something that is hard to name but impossible to ignore, I want you to type these words in the comments. I am ready to see clearly. Not as a wish, not as a hope, as a declaration. As the first honest sentence you have spoken today. Let it stand as a line in the sand between who you have been performing as and who you are about to become. I know the road ahead is not simple. I know there will be mornings when you wake up and the mask feels easier than the truth. I know there will be moments when you look at the people around you and still feel that vast, aching distance. But you know something now that you did not know before. You know why the distance is there. You know where it comes from. And You know that the only bridge across it is the one you build from the inside out. One honest moment at a time. One act of courage at a time. One small refusal to pretend at a time. The world does not need more perfect performances. It needs more people willing to be imperfect out loud. It needs more people willing to sit in the discomfort of their own unmasked face and say, "This is me. This is actually me. And I am done apologizing for it. You felt something break open today. Do not let it close. The masks will always be there, but you no longer have to mistake them for the truth. And the moment you stop mistaking the mask for the truth is the moment you finally begin to live. Not the life you were performing, the life you were born for.